Good morning. Right, yes, as Steve said, a bold statement, designing Identity 3.0 to fix a broken identity ecosystem. For those of you who are at B-Sides alongside InfoSec, there was a presentation, you can go onto the website and get it, I'm pretty sure, called The Epic Fails of Identity, looking at what's failed. I'm only going to pick one today because I've only got 15 minutes. What's wrong with Identity 1 and Identity 2? Well, ultimately, this is what is wrong. I was CISO for AstraZeneca. We had 66,000 staff and a whole bunch more contractors, other people on our identity system. And ultimately, someone somewhere, IT, who here works in IT? Yeah? Do you run Active Directory within your organization? Yes? Absolutely. So you're making a decision, aren't you? You're turning a variable, this might be Paul Simmonds, into a binary which you give to the rest of the business that says, this definitely is Paul Simmonds. There is no context behind that. There is no risk behind that. There is no information generally that they're inside or outside your organization or where physically they are. You're turning a variable. They came in using username and password, and guess what? It was a fairly crap username and password. And Active Directory or your AAA server says they are who they say they are. The business downstream in the server, it doesn't matter whether you're accessing Paul Simmonds' email on an email server or whether you're actually the CEO accessing next week's corporate results to the city, consume that same identity as a binary, they are who they say they are. Their risk has been totally and utterly divorced from that entire process. And as our previous speaker said, there is no context behind that or anything else. What we've done is we've ennobled that risk decision into a binary. So it only identifies the person. There's no context, there's no relationship, there's no understanding, and more importantly, most user information, if it's used, so Active Directory can have a whole load of other things in it, is not authoritative. It's all secondary information. And I could go on. We did about 11 or 12 epic fails of why identity is horribly, horribly broken and what we're doing wrong today. So let's look at the challenges. You've heard some of these this morning. Internet of Things, big, big thing. Need for authoritative source of attributes, bring your own identity. Yeah, Facebook, Google, Apple, whatever. It's generally a self-asserted identity. You need to understand the risk behind it. Yet you can go to a bank in Turkey and use your Facebook ID to do internet banking. Really, really scary if you're in the banks. Cars, phones, houses, all need to use personas. You heard that in the previous speaker. Access to government services. If we want to solve the reason that young people aren't voting and didn't vote the other week, well, let's have e-voting. But of course we can't because we don't have good enough identity to do it. Agents with access, again, you heard about the internet-enabled fridge telling you need milk. How do you make sure that is your fridge? More importantly, actually, when that fridge uses your credit card to order that milk from Tesco's to be delivered against your diary, which it queried, so it knows when it's in the house. How does all that tie up so that it's secure? And we've got to solve these problems, which is why we need Identity 3. So here, just to take a very different tack before we go on to what Identity 3 means, is here are some of the conundrums. The work that we're talking about here came out of the Jericho Forum and the Open Group and IBM Research and a whole bunch of other people. And Jericho works really well by looking at what the path has failed. And the fact is that every major identity project in the world to date has failed miserably. It's either failed totally, UK identity card scheme cost us $40 billion or whatever they're not telling us, or it implodes generally into a subset of government services. The German identity card scheme, for example, now is just started with grand aspirations. Now just a little bit of the federal government uses it. So at best it implodes, at worst it fails, costing you and I lots of money, because generally they're public projects. Here are the problems you have to solve. First of all, immutable linking. Do you know with any degree of certainty the trust level to which the person is linked to their digital identity? Because if you don't, you can't consume that in a server that you have no relationship with. Will the Chinese accept a US identity and vice versa? Because if you can't solve that, it ain't going to go global. And we live and work in a global environment. Is it persona-based? You heard about personas earlier, so I won't go into that. Are attributes coming from their authoritative source? We spend our lives dealing with secondary attributes, not primary attributes. And again, how much can you trust them? It goes to that risk decision. Is it privacy enhancing for you and me? So are my attributes, when it says prove you're over 18, do I need to give my date of birth? Which you do on your driving license at the moment. So if I want to prove I'm over 18 or under 30 or over 65 or whatever it needs to be, I hand over my driving license, which has my photo and it has my date of birth, and they go calculate. Yeah, okay, you are what you say you are. Privacy enhancing says, if it says prove I'm over 18, the assertion signed by UK government goes, because they're the authoritative source of my date of birth, because they own my birth certificate, the assertion signed by UK government says Paul Simmonds is over 18. Or actually, this entity is over 18. I shouldn't even need to assert my name. And ultimately, it needs to come in form factors that work for you wherever you are. We naively assume in the Western world that it all works with smartphones. Is that the same for the back end of Russia or in the wilds of Africa? Don't know, but it needs to work in form factors that work for them. It needs to be usable. So, very quickly, what does Identity 3 mean to you and me? One is risk. And I'm sure these slides are going to be available. So, decisions around identity are taken by the entity that is assuming the risk, not by the IT department on your behalf. So it needs to be tied in to the business process. Attributes for those identities need to come from authoritative sources, because they don't at the moment. They're all secondary. And a lot of them are self-asserted. And identity needs to work as well offline as it will online. And all that happens is, the difference is, the risk profile changes. Because it needs to work on aircraft, or it needs to work in sub-Saharan Africa. It needs to work. Your identity needs to work when you're not connected. And all that happens is the risk profile changes for the person who is assuming the risk. Privacy. Every entity, and by entity, the reason I'm not saying people here is the work out of Jericho defines an entity as a people, devices, organizations, code, and agents. 5 entity types. Every entity shall need only one identity, proof of sameness, which is unique and private unto the entity. And more importantly, there is going to be no body issuing or recording identities. Because there are places in the world that is hazardous to your health. Very quickly, I tell the story, it's a longer story, but my sister-in-law has a Ugandan passport. The reason she has a Ugandan passport is that she was a refugee from the Rwandan genocide. And she has one parent who is Hutu and one parent who is Tutsi. And they literally left the village as the previous one was being killed, raped, and pillaged, and ran for their lives. If you don't want to believe that information and attributes about you are hazardous to your health, believe that. You do not want that information getting into the wrong hands. Really key. So, no central body issuing or recording identities. And if you talk to the guys out there and they'll say, yeah, buy our ecosystem and everything will work. No, thank you. The identity ecosystem will be privacy enhancing. Attributes will be minimized, asserting such information, so prove I'm 18, not that my date of birth is. Entities will only maintain attributes for which they are their authoritative source. For UK government, my citizen persona of my identity should only contain 5 attributes signed by UK government, for which they are authoritative, i.e. my birth certificate, which is place of birth, date of birth, sex at birth, because it can change, probably colour of eyes, and maybe we can debate name. because name is a variable attribute, especially if you're a married lady in the audience. You've probably changed your name. The identity of one entity will be cryptographically unique. Yep, okay, negating the need for username and passwords, wouldn't that be nice? And ultimately, biometrics have to be private to me. End of story. I do not want my inside leg measurement, my 2 irises, my 10 fingerprints, and everything else being stored out there by someone else, even in transit. Thank you very much. I want to own them because they're mine. This is primacy at work. And ultimately, it then turns into cryptographic, and the cryptographic is shared because we can do that with zero-knowledge proofs and all the techie stuff to maintain that privacy link. Functionality. Really, really key here. The digital representation of a function of an entity will be indistinguishable. In other words, I don't know when I'm talking across the world whether I'm talking to another person or a computer or an agent that's working on behalf of someone else or a device or whatever. If it isn't interchangeable, this stuff isn't going to work, particularly with Internet of Things. Identity ecosystems must operate without the need for an identity broker, without the need of a CA of last resort, without any other centralized infrastructure. Because otherwise you won't solve that problem. Because if you say to the Chinese, you have to operate with the US infrastructure or vice versa, guess what? It ain't going to happen. Identity is simply expandable to encompass the security of data, email, etc., etc. In other words, can I leverage those personas and the crypto behind it to make everyday security for our data really, really simple and, more importantly, transparent for the user? And the answer that the work that we've been doing is yes, you can. An identity shall be invisible to the end user, we've just said that, and everyone plays their individual part for which they are authoritative and absolutely no more. So what does it look like? This is the work that came out of Jericho. Very simple with my core identity, the proof that I am me, down to your digital representation, and then your various personas signed by the people who are the authoritative source for it. Because the crypto is one way, really simple, it allows me, as the root of that, to assert multiple attributes from different personas, and I'm the only person who can do that. And then the person assuming the risk can say, yes, I can see that they're the only person who've assigned these 3 attributes, even though they're from different personas. They're signed by the authoritative source. Bingo, I now have a very risk-free transaction. Where are we? We think we have all the key blocks. They all exist. And where the Global Identity Foundation is at the moment is we're sanity checking the assertions. We're working with a number of key universities around the world. We have PhD students working on some of our edge cases for us. We've got a lot of support behind doing it. We've got certainly a couple of major companies who are putting identity management systems in today, using today's technology, that the roadmap is this. So I'll be around for a little while afterwards. Feel free to come and talk to me. If you want some of the related reading, this is all free. Go take it. Cloud Security Alliance, our white paper, the original Jericho Forum work. And with that, thank you very much.